My name's Adriana Papaleo here with TIGI and my amazing model, Michaela. We're going through a bit of a transformation today, which is going to be really exciting, creating a soft layer and working with a focal point of a fringe. To prep, we started off with our Color Goddess shampoo and conditioner. As we can see, Michaela has a really beautiful color, this kind of vibrant magenta. So we're working with the Color Goddess to make sure that we maintain that and keep the hair kind of feeling great as we go through the cut. Products. So I'm gonna layer a couple. First one is going to be Small Talk. That's going to thicken the hair and also add a little bit of texture. We're gonna distribute the Small Talk throughout the hair, beginning in the mid-lengths and ends, but definitely not being afraid to get that at the roots, so I can start to use that to build some volume. Next up, we have Queen for a Day, and I'm gonna layer this right on top of the Small Talk. This is gonna encourage more of that texture and give me almost a little bit of friction and support, as opposed to keeping the hair feeling very silky, and it doesn't showcase as much of the texture. All right, so to start the cut, we're gonna approach it by doing the length first. I wanna make sure that the whole thing is symmetric before I jump into the layers. So we'll start off with that center profile and just jump right into a horseshoe, and that will shorten my one length technique. So beginning just below the crown and taking that horseshoe all the way through to the front. Coming all of this hair forward helps me get that section in place, not to mention that the Small Talk is really aiding me in my end result for the partings and sections as well, and thinking as much horizontal inside of this parting as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and just approach the length from here, combing everything to the back of the head, working from that center line left and center line right. So all I'm looking to do is take whatever needs to come off to make this symmetrical and have a bit more strength in the perimeter. And I'm using point cutting for softness. Okay, so from here, now that I have that strength in the back, I'm just gonna go ahead and bring what lives in front of the shoulders in front, using the guide from just behind the ear to strengthen that corner. By over-directing just slightly and using a guide from behind the ear, this makes sure that I don't elevate over the shoulder. So now we have our length done. I'm gonna go ahead and subdivide the sections for the rest of the haircut. I'm gonna start off with a fringe. I'm keeping this fringe quite classic with 2 diagonal forwards. I wanna keep this really soft and subtle. Okay, we've got our fringe partings in. At this point, I'm gonna put in a radial so I always know where front and back are, so we can create an internal isolation. We have fringe, then we're working the higher side so that I'm only layering internally, and that way we always know we have the density of the perimeter. Or they want finer perimeter, you can go ahead and take this parting just a bit lower. All right, now to marry these two together in the back, I'm going to keep that center profile all the way through, and again, thinking about where we want that section to hit. From parietal ridge, working a nice curved parting to a round occipital. All right, we're gonna approach this first in the fringe. Now, you'll see a lot of times coming off of the round of the head, which I absolutely love, but for Michaela, I'm actually gonna keep this at a lower elevation and bring everything forwards. I can always soften that line after, but I wanna keep a bit more strength in here. So chin up just slightly. I'm going to use the pre-existing length that already is inside of the fringe that she has, and I'm gonna bring everything forwards. By over-directing forward, I'm increasing the length slightly out to the side, but it's not so much like a heavy curtain fringe. This is a much more subtle end result. Now, always thinking about when it's dry, we want to have room to detail as opposed to just taking it all off in the first go. But I think that this is a really nice place to start, so she can have a playful full fringe, but she doesn't always have to. Same thing on this side, keeping that elevation low, but still for softness, and using that guide from the right and through to the left. And there's our fringe. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is just strengthen up this line in the perimeter, and then we'll just jump right into the layers. For this, I'm just going to take that almost radial parting from the back of the ear, and I'm gonna keep it at a very low elevation and a very slight over direction, so I'm maintaining as much strength to this line as possible. Tilting Michaela's head helps me have control over that elevation. Fanning that hair over my fingers, I have the strength of the perimeter here, and I can see where we're missing the strength, around my third finger here. So same thing on the opposite side, and really it comes with just being as present as I can with my work. All right, we have our entire perimeter done. We can play with the fringe once we start to dry it, but now I'm gonna jump right into the layers. I'm gonna transfer my clips to underneath just so I know that I'm leaving that perimeter out, and you can go ahead and tuck the rest of the hair in front behind the ear. All right, I find this approach to a soft layer to be really fun and really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and take a 1-inch section right across that radial. So 1/2 inch in front and 1/2 inch in back. I'm gonna be working left and then right, and I likely will go short to long inside of that layer pattern, and in front of the ear, maybe over direct to the previous. We'll see when I get in there. And then everything in back of the radial will be over directed up. So everything is gonna kind of come into that center radial, maintaining length in the back and the front. Okay, so you might be saying, how is she gonna decide what length to do the layers? It's all visual. This is where I decide inside of our consultation and conversation exactly how much is Michaela or anyone else open to changing this look. Michaela definitely wants something that has that feeling of pulling down and not something that has a whole bunch of lift upwards, so that way we get that effect of length. So I'm going to visually figure somewhere around that shoulder is a good place for myself to start, which is still a good amount coming off from the inside, but certainly not going short. So we get a visual idea of where we're going, and then we can work, honestly, maybe even square in this line. I'm gonna go slightly short to long for this first portion to make sure that I don't go shorter than intended in my layers, but if we can, then we'll go square, which will give me even more weight. Great, I love where that's sitting. I can definitely go more on the square side, especially when we move in front and there is the face frame. So I'll take the teensiest little bit here. I'll move off to the opposite side, and then our guide is in for the rest of the cut, and all we have to do is follow. Now that we've established our guide, I'm gonna reestablish the radial parting. From here, I think I will go 90 degrees to each section in front, and I can always over direct the last one to the previous to maintain a little bit of weight inside of the area where people's hair gets the finest. But I also don't want to increase the length dramatically with a hard over direction all the way to the radial. So slight diagonal forwards, standing always behind, elevating up, finding that guide. And this is our last section in that front portion on the left. And over directing that just to the previous, which means my first parting is basically at 90 and the second parting is combed back to it. Same technique is repeated on the opposite side. Slight diagonal forwards, combing 90 degrees to the top of the head, following our guide, point cutting for softness. And again, this last section in front, over directed just to the previous. Okay, the whole front is finished. All we have to do is follow our guide in the back. Okay, body position on this portion is really key. I'm gonna be working horizontal partings down the head shape and bringing everything up to the radial. So I need to stand on the opposite side of where I'm over directing. That's gonna give me the most amount of control. And because we've already done our internal isolation, we know exactly where we are stopping. Tilt Michaela towards me so I can be sure I can see my guide, and everything is coming up to the top of the head. There's my guide. Now from here, there's not actually that much hair. I can do this entire last bit in one section. You want to take care to comb all the way from the roots to make sure you're not ending up with any bits that weren't cut at the same tension. Anytime we're over directing, we want to stand on the side that we're over directing to. This will give us the most amount of control because we are strongest in our core, as opposed to pushing something away from us. We have more control when we comb towards. It's like hugging. All right, so for Michaela's style out today, as I said, we're gonna approach this a lot with the paddle brush. The first thing I'm gonna do is get a little bit of lift and volume through the roots by going anti-root direction, meaning upwards and away from the face. And then I'll immediately dry that fringe going back and forth with the small paddle so I get, natural movement inside of that, and then I can detail that further with a round brush. So I'm gonna get the roots mostly dry, and I'm not worried so much about the mid-lengths and ends. I'm trying to reduce the moisture, but mostly I'm looking for that lift in the roots because I can get the mid-lengths and ends in the later portions. All right, so now that we've gotten a large portion of the moisture out, and I love the way that this fringe is sitting, it's really about not overworking it, so that's why I went in with the paddle brush. Now, the rest of it, I would like to add a bit more movement, so I'm gonna go section by section and use a small round brush for that thermal control and give it a bit more bend. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is just isolate from top of the ear to top of the ear. This allows me to work this entire underneath, and I'm gonna do this in 2 large sections. So again, it's not about tiny sections, it's just about control. One great little trick with head rush, if you have a client or model where you're not necessarily seeing the sheen or the sealant on the end of the cuticle that you wanna see, you can actually apply a little bit of this while you dry, and that will help with that. And it's just a light misting. We're not trying to coat it. From here, I'll jump right into the front, drop whatever's left of face frame after that fringe section and bend that. That way your client can start to see it take shape, and then it gives you just that internal portion to work through. All right, from here, we have this internal portion, and I like to just subdivide this so that way I have more of a top and bottom. Now with Michaela, I'm gonna actually use an alternating twist dry. As you can see, those twists, I'm not trying to be really strong with them. It's more about just a bend in through to the ends, like mid-lengths and ends. And I'm gonna switch directions each wave that I make, so that way it feels really organic. All right, now all I have left is this top portion. I always like to take one section where the radial would be, so that way I can continue to get a bunch of volume and approach it through the back. And then in the front, I'll either go across or internally. I'll figure that out as I go. Back portion is this whole section here, and I will just isolate it, add that head rush for shine, and then I will isolate it on a diagonal to keep myself soft in my lines. And I'll do that in 2 sections. All right, so now I have everything left in front of the radial, and I'm gonna do 2 sections on the left and 2 on the right. All right, so next, before I brush all this out, I'm gonna use a little bit of after party and just press that into the cuticle. What that's gonna do is help to seal any more of those little flyaways and give a really beautiful shine. Okay, and then I'm gonna just take the paddle brush again and just brush through these waves, kind of shaking them out on the surface as I go. All right, so we're all set with the cut, with the style out. All we have left to do now is just a little bit of detail in the fringe. I'm gonna come through again at a low elevation and just add some point cutting and make sure that this fringe, especially in the center, has longevity. So that's our representation of a soft layer, that square internal layer working nicely with that focal point of the fringe, and then a really soft textured blow dry to bring everything to life. All right, everyone, again, my name is Adriana Papaleo with my beautiful model, Michaela. I hope you guys enjoyed the soft layered texture. Don't be afraid to challenge yourselves. I know you get a lot of length in the salon, just like I do, so new approaches keep us fresh as well. All right, everyone, thanks so much, and if you're looking for more inspiration, take yourself to bedhead.com.